officially recording the session. And so I just want to say welcome to the next session in the reflective week. And certainly we want to say thank you for joining us. I am Leroy Hill. I'm director of Settle. And this afternoon, we are continuing with our third work item in the series of our reflective week. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a quick call, if you can. We're making a call. You know, that call will say, we need you. And we want to share with you very intimately the link that you can just hold it and grab it and keep it close to you. All of our recordings that we will be doing will be curated in our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, whenever we add a new content, you will be notified, especially if you use YouTube. So we certainly are inviting you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You should see it in the chat room in just a while. All right. In the meanwhile, I'll just put in a plug here for our reflective series. We began actually on yesterday, and we certainly want to continue. We'll be continuing it on. Reflection is an important part of our practice, improving our practice, and certainly we are being intentional about doing that. So the link is in the chat room. So if you could go ahead and do that, we'll take a pause for cause. Certainly to allow you to do that now, because sometimes we know you can forget afterwards. So you can certainly do that. Just follow that link, and then you can click subscribe. During the week, we certainly had a very exciting. Can you see my screen? Just double checking. You can see the screen. Great, excellent. So we began looking at reflective practice and action research, and Dr. Thurab and Nkosi started off looking at that, and it was quite an insightful experience for us to know that we know that research is important, but we understood clearly that using the systematic approach of action research, of inquiry, as we were able to see, okay, how you can go about using reflection as a central part in making improving your practice, the professional transformation that's needed to ensure that you're able to pivot into the next level for you from a professional standpoint. And we explored ways in which action research is used as one of the ways in which you can actually take that next step in making it more intentional. And we certainly benefited from it because we saw the utility of using action research, not just of building confidence, but being able to contribute to the field of knowledge. And in particular, and linking to our mission as UE in terms of contributing to a body of knowledge. And while you are improving yourself, you can actually contribute to a body of knowledge in particular faculty areas. And I was quite interested in the whole idea of using that and actually ways in which you can link that to the building a research portfolio. That was one of the key takeaways we got from that session. And then we were honored this morning with the session from reflective practice and peer observation by Dr. Dr. Jamison Charles, who really graced us from the School of Education. And she focused on peer observation. And again, it's something that we really want to address because this became a key area for us that we pulled out from the midterm accreditation. And one of the key things mentioned in terms of the need for us to actually give a little bit more direct attention to it in terms of the policies and so forth. But what we are doing instead is that we're being intentional about letting you know more about those different things. So we had a session on peer observation, which was well received because we know peer observation is an important part of reflective practice. Ideally, it is an opportunity for us to observe peers, being a critical friend, and being able to observe peers in the classroom, in situ, and being able to orient yourself and being comfortable with the idea of someone else in your classroom. So certainly we saw that coming out there. And so we are actually connecting the two sessions because, reflective practice requires us to improve and reflect and observe. But one of the key thing of the observation is using a data-driven approach. And using the data-driven approach is what we recommend, because that's part of the area in which we occupy. The terrain of academia, you want to ensure that you ground things to data-driven approach. So you're using research-based, data-driven approaches. And the session this afternoon fits quite nicely with that, because the session this afternoon positions you to actually understand the importance of student feedback, and as a lens in which you can also reflect from the feedback that we get from students. And so today we are focusing on that because the university sees this as a very important, good afternoon, as a very important part of our advancement, not just for everybody, but for the students as well. And so using a student-centered approach, we value the input that the students are going to give from the student evaluation. And we have no one but specially invited member of our Settle staff. By the way, I'm honored to have each the members of Settle staff here with me today: Dr. Justin Zephyrin, who is our faculty development specialist. You can see him waving there. Mr. Javed Muhammad, who is our e-learning support specialist. And we are honored to have today, and also seeing Mr. Randy Doku. We'll have to fix that, Randy. All right, so we can see you next time. Certainly, we need to see you next time. So we'll fix that. And today we are privileged to have Mr. Marc Garcia, who is our research technician. He mans the research unit. Good afternoon, Randy, again. He mans the research unit. And Marc has been a long-standing member of the Settle team. He has engaged in research and teaching in Settle, within Settle, for a very long time. And apart from research, he spent several years as within the higher tertiary Settle. I mean, it's about 10 years. And so his current role, he manages the student experience review, which is in part what we're doing here today, kind of sharing. And he's also introducing you to Qualtrics, because we have actually moved towards a new system. And so we want to also use the opportunity to introduce you to that. So I mean, Marc is keenly interested in using data-driven approaches in engaging quality of teaching. And so that is why he is the most appropriate and best person to introduce you to that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, please join me in using your emoticons, your reactions, in giving Mr. Marc Garcia a good welcome this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the introduction, Dr. Hill. You give me less to say, and I appreciate that. Again, welcome everyone to our third session in the Reflective Practice Week. It's something that we have been looking forward to for many months, and we are very appreciative of you joining us for these sessions. Now, earlier, as Dr. Hill said, already highlighted, we have been graced with the presence of Dr. Therabin Kosi and Dr. Marjorie Jameson Charles, and they have already covered the facts of how reflection could be improved, or how our teaching practice could be improved by peer observation and by action research. Now, what we want to do as we move forward is to always establish the link that is the running thread and the cohesion between all of these concepts that help us reflect to improve our teaching practice. But as you know, the CETL is a very fun team. And a lot of what we do, we want to make sure that learning and discussion, all those things are always enjoyable. So I know it's a little bit shy of 2 o'clock, but please forgive me if this sends you in the wrong direction. But I beg your participation. If you had to pick one of the 4 pictures on the screen at this time, feel free to share in the chat, or you can unmute and discuss freely. Which of these would you pick as your choice for dinner this evening. And I want you to tell me where you are going for it. So think about it. We have 4 options. It could be a late lunch or an early dinner. Burgers, doubles, roti, pilau. Which of these would you pick for this evening, and where would you go? Feel free to use the chat. Feel free to unmute and chime in.
I'm going for roti at Juman's in Curab.
Roti at Juman's in Curab. All right, that's not too far. So we hope you pass for the whole Settle team. It's about 6 of us here. So Listra says pilau at home. Justin is our roti man. Shelly says pilau at mom's. My goodness, Shelly. So nice. So everybody is turning to pilau by and large. Kunupia, fasting from meat for Lent, right? Burgers and crossing and salt. Oh, nice. So now that we have all of these suggestions and hopefully I haven't stirred too much appetite and hunger, let's start with Ladina. Where exactly in the cross are you sending me, let's say, for burgers this evening? If you were to carry us, where would you carry us?
Okay, number one, I'm not sure they're going to be open. I usually go on weekends, so I'm hoping that, you know, they're going to be open. But usually, if you go to Crossing, they have a series of these food trucks set up. And whichever is the food truck that's next door to the cheesecake one, I think they somehow partnered. That's the one. So this is some trendy directions going on here.
Right. Appreciate it. And you've had it before, right?
Yes,
Good.
I've had it before.
All right, Dr. Let's see, Ella Box, doubles in Kunupia. Why are we going there?
The doubles on Esmeralda Road taste really, really good. The guy actually gives you a lot. It's not, you know, you're not being tricksy with it. And the price is good as well.
Say no more, we're going.
Yes.
Thanks for that. I saw someone's hand was up. I hope I didn't miss that. Let's see, who else? Kyle says roti 100%. So Kyle, let me hear about the roti. Where are we going for this roti and why? Kyle or Justin, you also said roti?
Hi, sorry, I was muted. I think it's Sylvie's is the only place in Barataria. That's my suggestion.
Right. And why would you suggest it? Yes, Justin, I agree with that. So by and large, what we are seeing is that everyone from these 4 simple pictures can highlight what they would select, why we're going to a certain spot and why not to another. Now, if it is that Ladina gave me the directions to the burger cart next to the cheesecake cart, but I realized that there are 2, one on the left, one on the right. Now, Ladina once went last week and she tried the one on the right and she woke up the next morning unable to attend her class. And you know what? She decides 2 days after, she goes to the one on the left and oh, she's hooked. On the weekend, she goes again to the one on the left. Do you see that in small day-to-day activities, many of our decisions are simply based on reflecting on our experiences? Now, in this case, a simple case of food, what we are seeing is that for a customer to be a repeat purchaser or a repeat customer, it's always going to be based on the customer experience. Now, how does this translate to our topic? Well, we're all familiar with the shift that we have made in the strategic plan to more of a business model of service at the university. And when we think of this, it means then that the students are not just learners again, but they are the people coming to our food carts, coming to our roti stores, places. We are the ones now who must ensure along with management and so forth, that the experience makes them come back, stay, bring others. So by and large, that is how reflection works in day-to-day life. Now, what we want to do is to see how we can take it up a notch from reflection to an actual practice of reflection, how we can incorporate it into teaching. So the plan is that at the end of today, we could at least identify one model of reflective practice for our application. We want to be able, of course, to introduce Qualtrics. So we're going to see how to manipulate and navigate through the dashboard. We're going to see how to view and to download course reports, course experience review reports. And one of the very important takeaways is how we can use practical steps in response to student feedback. Now, if anyone were to volunteer, what would you describe reflective practice as in comparison to what we earlier discussed as reflection? How do you think it differs, or is it the same? You can feel free to unmute, use the chat, any would be fine. We're trying to set the foundation for why we are doing what we are doing. So perhaps we can look at the definition on the screen. It says that reflective practice is critical and deliberate inquiry into professional practice in order to gain a deeper understanding of oneself, others, and the meaning that is shared among individuals. This can happen during practice and after the fact, and can either be done alone or with others. Now, quick question. How do you think this differs from reflection, the general concept of reflection? So I've eaten food and I'm thinking about returning. How is this reflective practice different from reflection? Feel free to chime in. Darren says it's deliberate. Marsha?
Mark, I think it's a professional practice where we stack the learning repeatedly one upon the other so that we actually don't just do it one off and then move on. We constantly come back and look and grow toward aims, change the way that we function, see where the gaps are, and that way we get to improve continuously.
Right. Thanks so much for that, Marsha. So the trend that we're seeing, or the description rather that we're seeing, is identifying reflective practice as something that is purposeful. This is not just idle daydreaming. As Darren says, it's deliberate. Now, yesterday in Dr. Thirabin Kosi's session, the word systematic was used. And that aligns itself quite nicely with what Marsha described it as. So it is a systematic approach that is very deliberate in nature. Now, what does that mean for us with student evaluations? Well, simply put, as much as reviewing student evaluations could be a very emotional experience, we have to put a systematic approach and perspective to examining what the students have said. So let us discuss for a few, what are your thoughts on this perspective? Has this ever been your viewpoint? Is it currently? Why do you feel that way? Or if you think something opposing, that's fine. Any ideas? Student evaluations are confusing at best, discouraging at worst. Jeffrey Smith.
Yes, Mark, are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear. And excuse me, I'm now seeing your comment in the chat about the running belly. I'm sorry.
I guess I don't learn. Anyway.
Oh, Lord.
Is it correct that the percentage responses traditionally for students to this end of is between probably 3 and 15% of students respond? In which case, is there any, can we draw any conclusions? This is an exercise in futility that we sit down here for the next hour and a half. If we can't get students, we put notices on the My Learning, we encourage them, we tell them our promotion depends on it, and still they don't respond. So is it, are we are we wasting our time?
That's a very good question. And the truth is, from our programs running for the last, from 2015-16, when we switched to online evaluations, the response rate has traditionally been just about 25 to 35% within that margin. Now, when we switched to the university Qualtrics platform in September in academic year, this academic year, we have realized that there's a downward change. Now, we are concerned, yes, and those are different issues that we will definitely address, that we have been working to address, and we know will eventually be addressed. What we have seen is a push in the direction, as you would have noted, a complete change of the survey that is being used. The survey is a lot shorter, so every mechanism, as far as possible, is trying to be incorporated to boost the response rate. So that concept of dealing with response rates is an inherent concern because it always is going to question validity. We are all into data-driven approaches, and we know that it's going to question validity. But the purpose of this session is to really prepare us to see how we can use what we have for our own good. And we're looking at how the course experience review student evaluations could be used as developmental and shifting away from how it used to be viewed as punitive or strictly HR related or those kinds of things. Ladina says she views student evaluations with a growth mindset. Do you mind saying a little more on that, Ladina?
Sure. What do I mean by that? So, yeah. I mean, if it is that students, so apart from what the university uses, I sometimes check in with my students using Google Forms, and I ask them just simple questions. What's working, what's not working, how can we do better? But if I get them, coming back with negative comments, that's okay, because it means then that is a starting point to improve. Maybe I need to do something in a different way. Maybe, I need to engage with them more. And that's why I said I view it with a growth mindset, whereas I can improve. I can, take all these courses, workshops, whatever, and build my skills. So it's not that I view it, okay, I'm the worst teacher in the world. I can never go, make progress. So that's what I mean by that.
All right, understood. So from what we're seeing in comparison to the quote, I'm also reading the chat where Karelma says the new system has her feeling like what the quote says. It's confusing at best, discouraging at worst. So there are, as we said, inherent concerns, but the comfort is that we are working assiduously to get these addressed. Now, I can tell you from my experience in receiving evaluations, I have definitely felt this way. I have definitely felt like that, especially, sometimes the very first one you pull is something negative. That sends you in a different mental state. And then what if I simply am not statistically inclined? Some persons often say, I've heard it reported in other universities at conferences, that they do not understand the statistical tables. So there are different concerns or areas of concerns for different persons. Karama says mostly because she can't find the feedback or info that would help me specifically. It looks like it pulls from all lecturers. Okay. So hopefully, Karama, at the end of this session, we'd be able to streamline this and have you fully knowledgeable of how to manipulate and maneuver and navigate through Qualtrics. Now, as we have already highlighted, reflective practice is completely different from reflection in general. And on the screen, there are 4 different models of reflection. And we're going to discuss the 2 that are highlighted in bold as far as how we can use it to student evaluations. Now, by chance, is anyone familiar with any of these models? The one of Kolb, Gary Rolfe, Gibbs, or Brookfield? Simple yes, no in the chat would be fine. Okay, Rhoda says she's not. Kolb, right? So what we have actually realized as of yesterday's session, when we discussed some of the models, is that a great proportion of persons are not aware of the different models or are able to know how to apply them in certain cases. So let's start with the easier of the two. Now, in approaching nursing practice, Rolf suggested that 3 simple questions can be so very helpful in improving the practice through reflective practice. What does he say? 3 simple questions. What, so what, and now what? So in every process, he was indicating that we ask ourselves the 3 questions. Now, first of all, what? So I'm looking at what has happened. And if I'm narrowing this down or applying this to student feedback, what is the student really saying about me? What is the student saying about my experience throughout the semester, how I made it? Did I put things on my e-learning? Did I make sure that I was available out of class time to have discussions? Did I make sure that the discussion forum was active? Or is it that I just came in and posted the content at the start and never saw any new content until the end of the semester? What was I trying to accomplish? What other whats could you think of that we can apply to student feedback? And feel free to type it in the chat. Of course, there's a question of what does it mean to me? What materials did they need, right? Yeah. So we are seeing now that when we have our student evaluation, so we open Qualtrics and we're reading what activities and ICTs are used, right? So those are good pointers to start the approach of using reflective practice. All right, so what has changed for them? What skills are they expected? These are excellent suggestions. Now, let us think now. Okay, so I've established the what factor. What is my role? What do they need as a prereq? What ICTs are available? Now, the evaluations come and I read, and I'm now at so what? So the student says the AC was too cold. In truth and in fact, is that a so what for the lecturer? What do you think? The AC was too cold. Or the class was too far. Well, that was in the face-to-face paradigm. Javid says yes or no. Yes, it affects their receptiveness and my ability to teach and reach them. Agreed, right? So when Karama also says yes. So when we examine these things now, it's not that we just discard it immediately and say, oh, this AC just has nothing to do with me, that's for management. But we are again reviewing that maybe, my class might be 5 o'clock if it's face-to-face. And by that time, that AC has been running for the entire day and the evening is now setting in, so it's going to be colder. Now look at this, so what? So a student says that the teacher put nothing on my e-learning. How did this impact me? Now that requires that if I'm doing a reflective approach, that means that I would have had some inert sense of responsibility for not putting something on my e-learning. And it brings us to the next question. What are the broader issues that arise because of it? So that would show that we are either in coherence with or in opposition with the campus policy. And let's use a third question now. Now what? So you tell me, what would be a now what? The AC is cold. What is your now what as a reflective practitioner? That's your student feedback. The AC is cold. What's your now what? Feel free to use the chat. You could feel free to unmute. Any is fine. Either is fine.
Well, I know next semester when I teach a course in the same classroom, I need to bring this to the attention of campus management or somebody who's responsible for the air condition system, because it is impacting my students in the classroom. It would be a interference in communication as well. So definitely the now what is something I would have to do. Is something I would have to take into my own hands if that's the case. I mean, of course, I'm not going to mess with the thermostat, but I will do what I can do.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Javed. So let's see, let me just read the chat quickly. Find who has the remote, adjust the temperature, implement corrective measures, get ready to push and get a shift to location. So we're seeing that by and large, thankfully, the great majority is saying that our now what actually dictates that we do something. In relation to what Marcia highlighted at the outset, if reflective practice is to be systematic, and I decide my now what is to discard that AC, discard that entire issue that is affecting student learning, then am I able to actually complete this circle of reflective practice that Rolf is suggesting? What do you think? If I honestly and intently decide, no, I'm not going to implement. Yeah, and that's correct. So there is no way that we as a person or as teachers would be able to improve our practice if we decide simply no. As was highlighted, it is very right, Marcia, it is cyclical. So it must be stacked one on top of the other, it must lead into the other. Very true. We have to consider alternatives and discuss them with the student. Now, again, Settle is a lot of fun. So that was a lot of thinking, discussion. Now let's look at this short video and I want to see how we can apply. You can feel free when the video is finished, it's just a little shy of 1:30, somewhere there. You can feel free to say, how would you approach using Rawls model if you were the character in this video? So how would you, how would you approach using the Rawls model to this experience? 3 steps you can quickly give it, your what, so what, now what. How can we apply the model? You can feel free to unmute, use the chat, anyone is fine. What was he trying to achieve? We could only assume a workout. All right, Marcia says it was a comedy of errors. So what we want to do, right, is we want to be able to apply to this simple scenario. So I am the bear, I walk into this gym and I'm using the equipment. There's no trainer. All right. So Marcia says this, so what, how can I get more effective? So what can I do to help him achieve? The bear needs guidance. And those are good comments. So if I am looking at it as the what, so what now, what perspective? 1 second. All right. And I'm seeing that at this point in time, there's no trainer. So the what is, I am highly burnt up from that treadmill. The so what is that obviously this is going to impact me coming to the gym tomorrow or next week. And in now what is, will I even go to this gym again? Will I be a repeat customer to this gym? How can we translate that to student learning, student experience, a student making a conscious decision of which institution to attend, which institution he would advise his friends to attend? How do you think it translates? Correct, Bernice. What could you do to make it more effective? So are we seeing then how the models can be used to critically assess experiences? And we want to be mindful again of the business approach to the university as a whole. And that is why we are always looking at ways to improve our practice, this time, this week, through reflective practice. Now, moving on from Rolf, Brookfield also postulated a model, switch off my camera, that proposed 4 lenses that we should use in critical reflection. I think some of you who were attendees yesterday would have discussed this. And it shows that we can use the self or the autobiographical approach, the peer lens, the theory lens or the research lens, and we have the student lens. Now the self lens simply uses personal experiences. So like our friend in the gym just now, he would use his personal experience with that machine to provide some insight. So instead of perhaps using the treadmill, he's going to do some other form of cardio or leg workout. This morning, Dr. Jameson Charles was able to help us significantly with how we can use peer observation. So the peer lens is inviting our colleagues to observe, to give us suggestions, to give us comments on what we can do. Does anyone who was here this morning recall what is one of the main qualities that we're looking for when we are engaging in peer observation? What kind of colleague we're going to look for? I want to emphasize it just because it was of so much importance in the session earlier, and it's going to come again. Rohani?
Collegiality.
Yeah. And why is that? Why do you think that is necessary? Thanks so much.
Because we want to get an atmosphere of trust, you know, that you can get feedback without blaming or pointing fingers. So we have to establish that kind of environment to be able to get that, you know, that feedback.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Marcia says trust and collaborative flavor to the interaction. Dana says a critical observer. All very true. So we want someone whom we can trust and who is actually going to be helpful to the process. Now, the theory lens is just what it says. We use findings in the research, as Dr. Thurabin Kosi highlighted yesterday, that could guide our practice. So an example, some years ago, it was highlighted in one piece of research that a shift of power from the teacher to the students is sometimes helpful in a class. And what that writer was able to do was to show that instead of perhaps setting up a class in the normal platform audience format, the teacher decided that he is going to arrange his chairs in a circle. And we know how very commonplace that has been during the face-to-face time that we have had on the campus. So that is one example of how theory, research, the literature can guide our approach in reflection. For us though, we are looking this evening at the student lens, seeing through the student's eyes. Again, it's coming back to putting ourselves in the place of the person who's buying the roti putting yourself in the place of the person going to the food truck. How could we understand the impact of our practice really and truly if we are not looking at the one who is impacted the most? So why is our student feedback on this campus so important? Well, the new format is a strategic tool, which is, yes, still providing the feedback to lecturers and management, but this tool is definitely more of a developmental, has more of a developmental approach to it. Others have described the prior forms of assessment as too punitive, and what the university has made sure after several years of working on this is that these questions in the new survey, or in the new course experience review rather, are aligned with 10 distinctive teaching principles. So it's alignment with guiding principles. And because of this, the student feedback can help us as educators to be able to identify learning opportunities. Again, we could only see the learning opportunity if we put ourselves in the student's lens. So the aim of it, is this tool going to get a majority of students in a course? Oh, we that is an ongoing and inherent concern, and we acknowledge it. And it is at the same time comforting to note that we are not the only institution affected by it. So it's actually concurrent with the literature. So as we move forward now, we're looking at ways that we can use the student feedback to pinpoint certain things said, how I can use it. We know that the response rate is currently an issue, and we will get this addressed. Now, for the rest of the afternoon, what we would like to do after having laid the foundation is ask you on your end, perhaps if it's possible, on March the 17th, was it, Justin? An email was sent out from our office to all teaching staff. You could correct me if I have the date wrong. Yeah? Okay, good. So what you can do is look in your UWI email inboxes. You can search March 17th. It's, what's that, March 16th or something, right? And you can search Qualtrics invitation. And you would see an invitation, I think, from my name to log into Qualtrics. Right. So for those of you who have already signed up, thanks so much, Dr. Ellibox. What we can do now is just to simply log in to follow along, or just to make sure that we know navigation-wise where we are going to pull this data. So I could give you a second. If it would be very great if as many of you can log in quickly on your end so that it would be easier to follow. Okay, great. So if you're in, you can just hit a thumbs up in the chat. That would be helpful. No problem, Marsha. Okay, great. More and more persons are in. We really appreciate that. It's going to make life a lot easier. All right, so after you've logged in, let me just put things up on my end. All right, tell me if this is an example of what you are seeing. So you've logged in and this is the page that meets you. Is everyone there? Something similar to it. It may not have as many icons on the side on the left, but at least you should be seeing this, which is the second one that we have here, the STA Course Experience Review Dashboard. Right. Okay. So now I can share with you the one that I have opened. All right. Nice. Right. So is everyone seeing my screen properly? Just want to be sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
great.
yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Right. So what I have open before me is after, actually I missed a step. And that's in that screenshot that we showed earlier. Could you please select on the left side of your screen, the option that says STA Course Experience Review. Sandra, since you can't find the link. Okay, can you send me an email just to remind me of that? And I'll definitely check it after, if I can reissue it. So after you've selected the correct dashboard, now you should be seeing something that is similar to what I have on the screen. Now, please note that my view is for the entire campus. This is not sorted in any way. So simple things that we're going to look at. Okay, great. So what you can do, Sandra, is also send me an email just reminding me that you did not, or you can't find a link, and I would make sure that I reissue it. Yeah, that would be great. Right, so two things to note. At the top of your pages, you should see two filters. One would be course code, and one would be teacher full name. Is everyone seeing this? Again,
Yes.
all right, great. So just keep in mind that there would be extra information on mine. So what you can do, great, Marsha. So we know that many of you teach multiple courses. So in that event, know that when you initially sign into Qualtrics and you get to this dashboard, it is going to show you the data for all of your courses combined and pulled together. Now, what we would need you to do to distinguish which course is which is you simply click on the filter, the course code filter, and you would see the course codes for the courses that you have lectured or have had a teaching role in. Again, you're seeing all of the ones for the entire campus on my screen. All right. So feel free, select any course that is of interest to you in the meantime. And you would notice that after you've selected it, the data displayed is going to change. And that is one of the great things about Qualtrics. Qualtrics dashboard is very dynamic. We have become familiar to Courseval. It was appreciated. But as we have moved forward, this dynamic dashboard allows us to actually use more of the data-driven approach. Thanks for that, Stacey. We would be more interested in using the data-driven approach. Now, what do I mean by dynamic and being able to use the data-driven approach? So here's something that Qualtrics allows that we would not have been able to do in Courseval. So I'm doing a data-driven approach as reflective practice. And I want to know, Mark, how are the male students? So I've read enough articles and I know that there's an inherent difference, sometimes a bias that occurs due to gender. And I say, okay, I as a lecturer want to distinguish male responses from female responses. And I want to see how it affects the ratings that I receive. Well, in this case, we simply click on the variable that is of interest to us. So the female responses are highlighted by the pink part of the chart and the blue indicating male. You simply click on the blue and the dashboard is now going to repopulate itself and it's now going to show This is the dynamic part of the dashboard, only the male responses. Now, due to some initial settings that are being corrected by Qualtrics, you would also realize that after you have sorted or drilled down in your data, as you scroll, in my case, I may have everything, but in some cases, you would realize that some of these questions, the data for these questions may not be displayed. It may give you a message that the filter is too exclusive or something along those lines. But in this case, what the software is allowing us to do is to drill down, as we said, to drill down deeper. So I'm seeing now that out of all the 20,000 responses that we have received on the campus, and I've selected male now, only 5,000 gentlemen have decided to chime in comparison to almost 15,000 young ladies. So we are already seeing emergent issues or emergent trends that match what we know exists in the literature. Now, what if I wanted to go and see now what this means? So let's say I have interest. As we scroll down, let me explain first of all that the very first section examines the learning experience of the student. So the new course experience review survey is broken into two sections. One is for the learning experience and one is for the course design. So the learning experience looks specifically at what or how lecturers impacted or how their teaching practice was perceived by students. So it looks at questions as the learning outcomes being communicated, if the course material was presented in a way that it was understood, it was easy to follow, technology was used, and so forth. And it's actually a total of 15 questions in the learning experience part of the survey. So what we have done is we have created a summary of these means so that at a first glance, you can see your initial averages, your average scores for each of these questions. Of course, when you are maneuvering the software, please be mindful that it is dynamic. So if I were to click at this point on this bar, it's again going to change the data that is available or displayed to me. When that happens, have no fear, simply refresh the page. So as we scroll down, what we have done is broken down the learning experience now by question. And this is to show simple frequencies. So I can see that the numbers have changed. At the right side of every question, there's a response count. So for the question 1, there were 2,241 males who responded to question 1. The majority of them indicated that the learning outcomes were always communicated to them. And we can do the same as we look through each of the questions, question 2, 3, 4, so forth. And we come down now to course design, which is the second part of the question. And in this part of the questionnaire looks at things such as the availability of material. So whether it was in hard copy or on the e-learning platform, was there content? Was there the course outline provided on my e-learning? The textbooks, were they available? What about the assignments, the workload itself, the grading? Now, these have been decided upon as going with the course design again after a lot of rigorous work. Very thankful to our Board of Undergraduate Studies for that. And it has allowed this new survey. Again, after an overall summary of the mean ratings per question, we now have the frequency breakdown for each of the questions of the course design section. And again, we have the response count and the number of persons who would have selected each option displayed. So keep in mind, in this example, we've already selected male. So we are looking now, as we guide ourselves by reflective practice, to see what the males are saying. And automatically, the research shows that educators would gravitate to the overall questions. We know that in the past, we would have been familiar with the questions, the lecturer's performance was either fair, good, very good, excellent, or poor. Now that has been replaced with overall, I am satisfied with my learning experience in the course. So we are seeing that males were given a rating for all campus courses, 3.9, whereas for the overall question, they felt that they achieved their goals when they started the course, the rating of 3.8. Now, if I wanted to compare this immediately to the females, I simply remove the filter by clicking on what I initially selected. So I again click on male, allow it 1 second to reload and repopulate. It brings back the total responses, and now I select female. So this is just an example. And we're going to see, probably in this one instance, how much of a difference, or is there any difference between the ratings provided, the average ratings for the overall questions for the male and female. Of course, this is purely observational. And we wait on the data to populate in the report. So what we can see while it's loading is that for the mean overall ratings, there were almost 2 to 3 times the number of responses given by males as by females. This is moving very slowly. Marsha, I think we are having the same problem. But it's getting there. Here is loaded, here is loaded. Right, great. So we see now that the females in this case have given, correct, Dr. Hill, have given a slightly higher rating to the 2 overall questions. So they are given a rating of 4 as a mean to the overall learning experience of their lecturers. Now, that is just observational data, as we said. One of the key concepts in examining student feedback is always, as you would be familiar with, comparing the quantitative with the qualitative data. So we know that we have had open-ended questions as customary, and that is no different with the new course experience review survey. So our 3 questions in this case: what did you like most about the course? What did you like least about the course? What changes would you recommend for teaching this course in the future? Now, at this point, again, please remember that we have an active filter selected, so we are only viewing female responses. And what is good about this dashboard, the Qualtrics dashboard, is that while I'm scrolling down, yes, I can read the actual responses as a list on the right, but the left side provides word clouds that could show the bigger the word, the more popular it is being used in the list of responses. So students who are female at the St. Augustine campus clearly have some interest in the word or describing the lecturer when they think of what they like best about the course. So let's see how we do it. We just click on the word in the word cloud. So now, from the data-driven side of things, I am now examining data given by female students at the UWI St. Augustine campus who are saying or have included something specific to the lecturer in their open-ended comment. So now we can see how we can pull the quantitative and match it, compare it, think about it with the qualitative data. Now, here's what the software can do a little further. What if I tell myself, so females give a higher rating than males. They said good things about the lecturers. Let me now see if I can compare this. So I go back to the top. Let me see how the students who barely logged into my online classes rated me. Now, the drawback that we mentioned earlier, you will now realize is coming into play here. So when I select a 3rd filter, it's going to load. So it's now going to be showing me females who have only logged into my online class at least 1 day for the week. And there were only 218 of these students. Now, I am hoping that it would be displayed below. If you are having issues viewing the data as you filter. Please keep in mind that not everyone is experiencing the issue and it is being progressively sorted by Qualtrics. So in this case, students who are female and who have only logged in once for the week in my class, out of that group of 217 persons, 171, let's say, are always saying that they had easy access to the course material. Now, often the literature, not literature, the viewpoint is that persons who are not in the class frequently don't have good things to say. So immediately you could see how the data-driven approach, in this case facilitated by the new platform, is allowing us to contest some of these things or to verify whether it holds true in our case. Of course, the more data we have as the years pass, it would be even better. What Qualtrics also allows is in these widgets that one be created to show a time comparison. So your student rating, your overall rating over time, if it was a 3.5, went to a 4, came back, all of that can be displayed. Of course, that we would get into in another session. So we have identified that we are viewing female students, the ones who only came once, and now look at the rating that they are given. They are given some very high ratings for the overall question. So let's examine a little further now the qualitative shortcut to reset your filters, just refresh your page. Let's examine some of the qualitative responses. So if you're filtered and you're having problems viewing the entire pool of data, simply just hit the refresh button. It will reload on its own good time, but it will reload. Have no fear, it is not lost. All right, so it's populated once again. So what we have done so far is seeing how we can use Qualtrics, this Qualtrics dashboard, to add filters, to drill down deeper into our data. Whatever we can do for student gender, excuse me, we can also do for student age. Whatever we can do for student age, we can do for a class attendance, frequency of logging in, as well as any other, even the individual questions we can click on, and it's going to filter those responses. All right, so let me get down to the nitty-gritty of the qualitative. So open-ended comments. Is everyone following? Yes or no in the chat? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm seeing someone is asking about exporting to PDF. We're gonna come to that as soon as we finish with the, one second, with the qualitative. All right. So we're loading. Still loading.
Hey, Mark?
Yes, Javid?
There's a question in the chat here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to address it right now. The report is only accessible by the lecturer or lecturer. Or lecturer, HOD, and dean, as was previously.
Okay, Dr. Ellibox, is it that you want to know if it's only you would be able to see it, or if the dean and the HOD would also be able to see it?
Yes, that's what I want to know.
Okay.
Yeah, that part of the policy has not changed. Yeah. So what the, okay, so good that you brought it up. So just as my dashboard is showing me all of the aggregate data for the entire campus, the deans have a special report that allows them to see only the aggregate data for their faculty. Heads of departments have a report that is only geared to their department. So in those roles, their dashboards at the top would have filters for course codes, lecturers, because they would have all the lecturers in the department now. And they could sift through and see who did what, and of course that's going to come up in managerial this decision making. So in the qualitative remarks, the open-ended questions, we have already highlighted that if you are interested in seeing something that was popular, you just click on the words. The bigger the word, the more often it was used. Now, in this case, let's look, for example, at the question, what did you like least about this course? Would we see co-lecturer reports as well, Mark? No, we are not supposed to. If you are, please send me an email as soon as. We would like to get your feedback on the system. We know it's new to all of the campuses. So all of us across the campus, cross-campus team are working on getting feedback. How do you think it's working? Are you seeing too many things that are not relevant to you? We'd appreciate your feedback. All right. So in this example, let us see now what students thought about the assignments. So Karelma, earlier you indicated that you were not able to pinpoint quickly enough things that were pertinent to you. So are you seeing now that it is allowing you to drill down by the click of a button very quickly to get to what it is that you're looking for?
I find the filters and everything are very good, and they're helping me with what, especially the word maps, which one were the most commons and everything, but those all seem to be more geared toward the course overall.
Right.
And I'm sure myself and others teach courses with multiple lecturers, and
right.
I know you're trying to make this to improve the course overall, but appraisal is still very much individual. So unless I can get a score that says Dr. Frontera got one in a scale of 1 out of 5, got a 4 or a 5 or a 3 in this question, it's not going to be helping me for my evaluations when I have to go up for anything. It does help me for the course. Like I have seen some feedback that I can address, but it's not helping me as career. So as part of my portfolio for my career is not helping me because it's all very general. And then I was able to find a comment that was very nice that said I was amazing, but I have no other question that says this, Dr. Frontera did this and this and this and helped me. So that I have no backup for that.
Right. And you see that situation that you're describing, sadly, is tied to the response rate at present. And that's why we're saying as we continue to work on it, the responses, we hope to get it back higher than where it was. And that would allow for something that is more useful. But keep in mind, while you are sorting your data, that entire section on learning experience to the top, just after the demographic data, this learning experience is pertinent to you alone. This is not to any other team member in the course. Yeah. So you can keep that in mind as well. So what we did, okay, I'm seeing the data has changed to 678, right. What we have done below is we've selected students who have mentioned something negative about the assignment. So from this perspective, the dean, the HOD, even the lecturer would be able to come in, would be able to see what is the point of contention. So look in this case. It says sometimes I was not too clear with the submission boxes for assignments. So just be a bit clearer with those instructions. A lack of guidance for essays. At times, topics related to an assignment are taught after the assignment due date. It would have been better for it to be taught before the assignment is due. So it is just an example of showing how we can pull out key things, as we said, identifying learning opportunities for it to be a developmental tool. Jeffrey says, okay, chat moving a little too fast there. Okay, so Shaman says this lecture experience is lecture specific. Yes, it is. Do students fill up one of these for each lecturer? Yes, it's one per lecturer. And let me be specific. It's one learning experience for lecturer and one course experience for the entire course. So if I have a team taught course with 3 lecturers, it means that the student is filling out 3 sections of learning experience and 1 course design. Next question. Okay, Karalman, noted. How do we reach the lecturer specific part? Right, so what we are saying is the lecturer specific part is this, let me refresh, is this very first section that discusses the learning experience. So keep in mind it's broken into learning experience and course design. Course design will incorporate what the student has said regardless of the lecturer. The learning experience, so as you scroll down, it's just after demographics. This section of learning experience is specific to you alone. Are we getting that? Yeah, all right. So this is just almost like a crash course into how we can use or get our money's worth, let's say, from Qualtrics. It's definitely allowing us to do things that we were not able to do with Courseval. And what I like is that each of the lecturers can do it. It is not something or a privilege that is retained by only the administrator. Of course, there are certain levels of drilling down that you may not have access to, but it is definitely a more dynamic tool than was our prior tool. So at this point, if I can just get back my stuff, right. After we have now been able to navigate and view reports, and I forgot, let me quickly show the download. Randy, so you have a question?
Yeah, we have a statement from Dr. Hussein.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a little further up. You could just check and see. He asked a question.
Okay, so that's the same case. Send me an email specific to it, just reminding of the issue, and we will work on it. Right, so after I view this, Karelma, let's say you wanted to see what the student said specific to you, and you're now asked to download this, to save this, to copy this, to email this. You want to make sure that you have something in your hand that doesn't require internet. You're simply clicking on export, and you can choose to download the dashboard or email the dashboard. So at the top right of the page, just under the initial for your name or the whole of the account, you're clicking on the export drop-down button, download dashboard or email dashboard. After you click on the download dashboard, you can select the different sizes, layouts, and so forth for your own document. Another feature, suppose we are in a meeting with our head and the person wants us to bring up our report. We have, if we are doing a share screen like this, what I can now do is select the kiosk mode. So at the top left of the page, just under the XM logo, in that very first line of options, we're going to option icon number 5, which is the one similar to the media button or play button. And by selecting this, we activate kiosk mode. Kiosk mode is simply like a PowerPoint presentation. So it takes the full screen. I don't know if you're still seeing, or if it has changed the view. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yeah, but it's loading.
Okay. So this is something, just another option that you can keep in mind in the event of you having those types of meetings to discuss your student feedback. So by and large, that is what Qualtrics is affording at this, as of now. Now, after we have been able to access the data, we have the foundation of the concept of reflective practice, we want to make sure that our takeaway is pretty much in the back. So some of the things that we want to note when we're responding to student feedback, we want to use a 5-step approach. Our very first step is simply just to reflect. So before we even start, before we pull up that page, think about what it is you're expecting to see. You know how much work you put in as educators, you know how much preparation. Think of what you're expecting, what you knew went well in the course. So obviously you're going in to the course experience review, looking for certain comments, possibly specific to what you have done. What are some areas for growth or development? So realize that this reflect stage, the very first step in responding to student feedback, is setting up nicely for us the first stage in Rawls' model of reflection. That what question. Step 2, we want to read and react. Now, what does that mean? It simply means that you read it. If you're vexed, you're vexed. If you're happy, you're happy. Don't inhibit an emotional reaction. It's natural. You have an emotional response, you have your emotional response. Nobody is telling you not to. But step 2 leads into step 3. Take a minute and relax. Why relax? Those same emotions probably need a little time, process it, think about the emotion. Is it really worth it? Or is it something that I can give more of myself into? Just pausing for that second to relax helps us to reconfigure our approach. So we deal with it now almost with a fresh mind. And that's another thing. We're dealing with it in a fresh mind. We want to be selective as to the time of day that we choose to review our student feedback. We don't want to do it under stressful situations. It might sound funny, but the literature actually supports it, that we be very systematic in our approach to student feedback. Now, after we have reflect, read and reacted and relaxed, we want to revisit. So we've calmed, collected ourselves. We want to now approach the student feedback with this, a new clear mind. We're going now to understand, you know what? They might be vexed. The words may not have been nice, but I'm trying to understand the students' perceptions. Is there a bigger picture? So what, as Rawls said, is there a broader issue being raised somewhere? And then after we have done those first 4, we then decide to respond. So now I will make my decisions. What would I keep? What would I do differently? How would I do it differently? So we have moved through these very 5 steps in responding to student feedback by using an approach that is theoretically correct and an approach that is systematic for our own educational experience. So by and large, from what we have discussed, can we see how the data-driven approach to analyzing student feedback is helpful? Okay, feel free to ask any questions, any comments at this point. Do you think that this new tool is something that can definitely work for you? Dr. Ellie Box asked, let me just catch back the chat here a bit. How long does the report stay under the profile? As long as we have the license, pretty much. We can filter and export, download the filter dashboards. I believe so. I have tried it when I was doing the first setup. I believe it does. Thanks for the takeaways, Javid. Very true, Dr. Elibox. And again, we acknowledge everyone that it is inherent that we are working with a serious issue of response rates. So we are always looking for support. We are always looking for new ways. If you have suggestions, feel free to email us, to email me. You can also email me at sta-cer@sta.uwi.edu. Marsha says it's very useful. It shows great contrast and feedback from different students. It ramps up potential. Yeah. What I'd also like to do at this point is inform you that if all went well, 1 second. The student evaluations for semester 2 were supposed to have been distributed while this session was going on. I had set it and uploaded it. And if all went well, please note that as of today, the students would actually begin the process of providing feedback based on their experience this semester. And what I would like to share is this link to everyone. Right. So this link is a short promotional video. It's like a stinger video that we are asking that lecturers please share with the students. In the event you still have classes going on, if you can just step out a couple minutes, it's a minute-long video. It's just to push it, to promote it, to guide the students as well to how they can navigate it in accessing their evaluations and proceeding to complete and to give the feedback. So please forward the link to your colleagues who may have not been able to join us. And we are convinced with continued support from all of the teaching staff that we will get the response rate to where we want it to be. And we thank you all very much for joining us. We thank you for your participation. I hope that it has been an enjoyable guide. And we know we can think about, keep in mind those 5 things that we've discussed, the 5 steps to approaching student evaluation results, all those R's. Don't be afraid to have an emotion, just capture it back, new mindset, and then come up with a plan. All right, so once again, thanks to everyone. Before this session is finished, as the person who is going to, who evaluates everything, please note that a link would be posted in the chat very shortly. This link is to evaluate this afternoon session. We want to know how we are doing, how we have done, if we are addressing successfully the needs of the campus. So we'd appreciate, we'd encourage your honest, succinct feedback using Qualtrics.
Yes. Thank you. Justin, go ahead, and then we will do the close up.
Sure. I just wanted to make, first of all, thank you so much, Mr. Garcia, for that very useful and insightful presentation. I was just going to make the point, I kind of typed it in a question format in the chat that, you know, I think it becomes very much more useful or more insightful when we use this continuously. And I'm saying that in the context of course, reflective practice. So you may have gotten your results from last semester, and you, after going through that process that Mr. Garcia mentioned, and you notice certain things, you know, strengths, weaknesses, you know, student preferences, etc. And you may think, okay, what can I do differently? How can I address those weak areas? And you may have come up with some innovative plan to try something new. And then the next step, therefore, would be looking at the data from a subsequent CER data and compare and see to what extent was that intervention, let's call it that for now, successful. I also want to make mention and connected to the session we had yesterday that this data is something that you can easily use for what we call action research. And we know that as academics, of course, publications are important, right? As the saying goes, publish or perish, you know, but this is, you have the data right here, literally. So you could easily use the data from this platform, and you see how it's nicely laid out in a way that is easy to understand and allows for more in-depth analyses. So it works in tandem or complements the reflective practice. Yes, I just wanted to make to further endorse that point that Mr. Garcia made.
Thanks a lot for that, Dr. Zephyrin. And a point to note too is that as we move forward and we gather more data as time passes, feel free to reach out to collaborate. Like I said, I would have other levels of access to drilling down those kinds of specific needs or interest areas that you may be looking at based on what you're reading in the literature and comparing to your own practice. Two things that I omitted. Please, when you're observing or examining your qualitative feedback, the open-ended questions, it is suggested often that you don't just read it student by student. Instead, what you do, you read it question by question. And that's one of the major advantages with the dashboard of Qualtrics. So it gives you a question by question instead of showing you an overall view student by student, as we have had in the past when we did the paper format of the survey, the evaluation. So question by question, what did you like best? Read all of it, think about it, create the synergy, see what is standing out, what is the outlier, do the same for what do you like, what did you like least, and what comments do you have? And as Justin said, keep in mind that from the very get-go this evening, we have highlighted that this thing is intentful, purposeful, it is systematic, so it is not a one-off thing at all. It is something that we are trying to do every semester, and we know that many of you do it even in the semester as formative evaluation, and we commend that, and we really appreciate your effort.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You have done an excellent job in closing off today's session. And again, if we are to think about it, I know quite a number of comments were made in terms of trying to focus on the challenges we have in regards to the response rate. But certainly we know that university is not going to go back to that, and they've invested quite amount of time and resources in preparing. And part of our effort is being intentional in preparing you and for you to build capacity, using it in multiple ways to improve your practice, but also in terms of, how do you actually use data-driven approaches in solidifying that. So Mark, I am really happy that we had this session this afternoon. Thank you again. And I want in the chat room, if you could share the key takeaways from the session, you can go ahead and do that in the chat room. I know it's now 3 o'clock and I really don't want to keep you here longer, but certainly this has been a point for us to reflect. And I want for us to quickly share that in the chat room. You can certainly go ahead and do that. And while we're doing that, we can certainly see how you are able to use the data to do so many different things. I want to stress here at the end of it all, it's about the student experience. You notice that there's a sort of rebranding of the focus to the agency of trying to focus on the experience that the students have. So I know we've had feedback from one person who's particularly when you're doing team teaching. So we noticed that you have a feedback for the course experience, but you also have the and I must value here, which is what Mark mentioned. There are also ways in which you can formatively get and collect feedback from your students. We do encourage you to do that as well. Certainly, especially when you're doing a team teach approach, you may want to have a Google form midway in your course to see, okay, fine, how am I doing? There's a very simple way of doing that. And that is certainly part of your agency, because certainly we're doing that. We do recognize the equivalency approach where we would have had a teaching assistant actually conduct. And so we're exploring ways in which how we could actually mimic that. We're trying to explore many ways as possible to see how we can address those. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your patience. And again, click on that link. Let us know how we're doing and how we can strengthen, how we can better serve you. And we look forward to seeing your subscription. Again, I would be happy if each of you here, we have 30, if each of you here go and click on that YouTube link and press subscribe. Thank you so much. We're going to stop the recording and then you can certainly continue the discussion. But if you can as well in the chat room, key takeaways from the session, certainly we would be happy if you can do that. All right.